Do you need a landscaping job tackled? Keen Landscaping is a family-owned and operated full-service landscaping company based in Dallas, Texas. Anything from property restoration and tree pruning or removal to landscape design, construction, and installation, Keen covers it all. They're also the official landscape company of the Dallas Stars. Learn more at keenlandscaping.com. Again, that's Keane landscaping.com. Welcome to Parker's MMA Show. If you want to learn about all things going down in the fight world, you've come to the right place. Each episode, your host Parker Keane will take a deeper dive into the always entertaining world of sanctioned fist fighting. Now here's your host, Parker Keane.
Parker's MMA Show back in action this week, as well as UFC 254 going down on Fight Island. Billy, we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to start by kind of recapping last week's boxing match, as well as the Zombie Brian Ortega fight. Chris Cyborg was back in action, and then we're going to get heavy into UFC 254 going down this weekend. So, Billy, let's get rolling. I want to jump in first. Our guy, Teofimo Lopez, dethrones the king, Lomachenko. I think both you and I both thought this was maybe a possible outcome. It was. I think we saw it pretty even. But what did you make of the actual fight?
Amazing game plan by Teofimo Lopez, right? I mean, use the jab early. You know, everybody talks about Loma as kind of this rhythm fighter, right? This guy who, you know, everybody loves to talk about the Ukrainian dance story and how his father pulled him out of boxing to dance, so he had great footwork. But he's very rhythmic in the way that he fights. And so the use of the jab, and especially probably the first 4 rounds of that fight by Teofimo Lopez, was really stunning, right? It was able to throw Loma off of his rhythm in a way that we've never seen, because Loma's known as a slow starter, but he's usually a guy who, you know, is not getting hit at all, just downloading information, and the first couple rounds are usually very boring. Teofimo was hitting him. I mean, he was hitting him with jabs early, and we really have not seen anyone do that to Lomachenko, so that was very impressive to me by Teofimo Lopez.
Yeah, totally. And that was kind of what we said he needed to do to win this fight was, you know, start fast, bring the fight to Lomo. Loma felt that power, and I think, you know, he was very, very wary of that power early. So, yeah, this dude's a problem, you know, and he's going to be very tough to beat at that weight class. And I just think for Lomachenko, I just think he didn't get into the fight soon enough. He just, you know, it was round 7, 8 before he started picking up the pace and really, you know, doing what he does best. And you can't spot those rounds to a guy like Lopez, who's not going to go away, and he's going to carry power, you know, throughout and be dangerous throughout the entire fight. So, how did you score the fight?
So I had it 117-111, which is 9 rounds to 3 for Lopez. I thought rounds 2, 5, 7, and 9 were really close. Really close. And could have gone either way, honestly. But that's how I had it. Incidentally, one of the judges actually had my exact scorecard, which I don't know that that's a good thing for me.
Is that the judge everyone was roasting?
No, there was a judge who had it like 10 rounds to 2 or 11 rounds to 1.
Yeah, I thought that was crazy. And yeah. I saw it closer. It could have been a draw.
It could have been a draw.
I honestly, with boxing, like, I saw that very close to, was it the first or the second Canelo Triple G fight? It was like
the second one.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been mad with the draw, but I thought that Lopez put a statement on the fight with that 12th round. I really did. We were watching it. I think I missed the first round. We tuned in about the second round, and, you know, I thought Loma had round 7 to maybe 10 or 11 maybe, and then that round 12, I mean, Lopez came out and just freaking brought the fight to him. So he did it. I mean, he did what he needed to do to get that win. I feel very comfortable that he won that fight. That leads me to my next question. Do you think we'll see an immediate rematch with these two guys?
Yeah, I do, because I think boxing matchmaking cross promotion is really hard right now with the pandemic and the state of boxing. So the next kind of guys up for me would be like a Devin Haney or a Gervonta Tank Davis. I don't think either of those guys fighting Lomachenko or Teofimo Lopez anytime soon. I think this was a close enough fight that you could see a rematch, and it did big numbers, right? So, these are probably thought of as guys who are not that big outside kind of the hardcore boxing or hardcore combat sports space. And this was definitely a marquee event for boxing, which you and I have talked about has been really down during the pandemic while the UFC's been up. So, I would like to see an immediate rematch just because I think the interest is there.
Yeah, and I think Lomachenko that maybe grows into this weight class a little more, maybe comes up with a better game plan, gets started faster against this guy. That makes for a really, really fun second fight. And then, possibly they could build a trilogy into this. And then at that point, I think these two are probably putting on some of the most competitive fights in boxing. So it's a way to, especially for Lopez, a guy that's not as well known as Lomachenko, to build that name, while boxing is slow, while the big names aren't fighting. So, I think they should definitely do an immediate rematch. I'm thinking early, 2021. But overall, great fight. Two great fighters. Billy, I don't even know what this question means. All right. Billy says there was a big debate on Twitter after the fight about considering boxers fighters.
So,
dive into that one, Billy.
Here's the question, right? Here's what was floating around. I think I know where you're going to stand on this, right? So they kept calling, referring to the two boxers, Lomachenko and Lopez, as fighters. Kept calling them fighters. And there was, definitely a backlash from part of MMA Twitter saying, boxers aren't real fighters. The only real fighters are, MMA fighters. Where do you stand on that?
MMA Twitter is so dumb. They can be so dumb at times. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Are you kidding me? Anyone that engages in a combat one-on-one sport with another man is a real fighter. If they don't think boxers are real fighters, go see Arturo Gatti, Mickey Ward trilogy. There's so many crazy wars.
Hagler-Hearns.
Hagler-Hearns in boxing. I mean, you don't understand, too, boxing is a sport that these guys have grown up doing their entire lives. It's not like MMA. You don't jump in at 21 years old after wrestling, in college. Professional boxers, most of them outside of maybe Deontay Wilder, have spent a lifetime boxing in gyms, going to war and sparring, taking damage. I mean, these guys are warriors. That's absolutely stupid. MMA Twitter, relax. Come on. All right. I don't want to talk about that anymore. That's retarded. All right, let's move on here. Billy, UFC Fight Island. Last week, Fight Island, that's number 6. We've got Jessica Andrade was back in action, moving up a weight class, taking on Caitlin Charkougian. Did I butcher that last name?
Chookagian. So very close.
We'll just stick with blonde fighter.
That's why I put blonde fighter down in the notes.
Andrade looked great to me in her move up. She now becomes the first woman with wins at 115, 125, and 135. My question for you, does Jessica Andrade deserve the next title fight against Valentina Shevchenko?
Why not, man? Why not? I mean, this is now 2 in a row because we both thought she looked great against Rose Namajunas. I know Rose won that fight. It was a fairly close decision win, right? It was 2-1. I believe it was a split decision even.
I think it was, yeah.
We both thought that Andrade looked great. The only people she's really lost to, Joanna, Weili Zhang, and Rose Namajunas at 115. Right. She comes out there against the number 1 contender. I mean, Caitlin Chookagian, say what you want about her as a fighter, but she's the number 1 ranked fighter at flyweight. She comes out and she knocks her out in 30 seconds. What more do you want? I mean, that to me is someone who deserves a title shot. Are you going to give Cynthia Calvillo a title shot over her? Because that's crazy to me. Calvillo, albeit a good fighter, like won a boring 5-round decision against Jessica Ai. I think Chookagian is better than Jessica Ai, and Andrade stopped her. I mean, that has to count for something, right? So to me, it's the obvious.
Yeah, I mean,
choice.
she's totally, and just like name value in women's MMA, she's next biggest name in this weight class, like by a mile. You know, I am like pretty hardcore, and I couldn't name 10 125 fighters. I don't think. So, I got no problem with her jumping the queue, and getting that next fight. So, all right, let's move on to Brian T. City Ortega, back in action after a 2-year layoff, and puts on an absolute masterclass against the Korean Zombie. Billy, what were your immediate reactions to that fight?
Sobbing quietly to myself as thinking about Korean Zombie's career. I was super impressed, right? I was super impressed because Korean Zombie's a great striker. He's a great striker. And Brian Ortega outstruck him. I mean, that was a striking match. Sure, like Ortega did a great job mixing up the takedowns, threatening the takedowns with little feints and whatnot, and, kind of opening up his boxing. I mean, the way he opened up that spinning elbow, that's the highlight of the fight. That's probably the highlight of the night for me. I mean, that's
I think that changed
technique.
the fight, right? That changes the fight. A shot like that. Yeah, I think Korean Zombie went on to say he didn't remember hardly anything after that shot. And
yeah, but I mean, on top of that, you watch the guy for, the other, 24 minutes and 50 seconds of that fight, right? You watch the guy who feinted his power hand, was able to open up the body kicks. I mean, those body kicks were vicious, and it was just a different level of striking than we've literally ever seen out of Brian Ortega.
Yeah, totally. And it was, I don't even know what to compare it to. I mean, it reminds me of like the Justin Gaetjhe 2.0, the Sean O'Malley, although the competition wasn't the same, but when he came back from that layoff, just how sharp he was and how much he had improved. I think Brian Ortega is a guy that's he's had good boxing, he's got phenomenal jiu-jitsu, but he has seemed to really just put everything together, and he was just firing on all cylinders. He seemed super calm, super scary without his beautiful hair. Really fluid in the striking, like you said. I mean, the striking was like night and day. The way he was mixing it up and controlling the distance and controlling the fight with a guy in Korean Zombie that's an incredible striker and has an incredible track record. Man, that was really, really impressive. I mean, the Korean Zombie just couldn't get started. Brian Ortega completely shut him out, takes a 50 to 45 decision across every scorecard. Incredible. So for Brian Ortega, in your mind, is he the next in line for the title?
He has to be, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I went
totally.
into this fight, I literally said on the show last week, I'm pretty sure, there is no way Brian Ortega fights for the title next, no matter what he does in this fight. I'm pretty sure I literally said that. And that performance was that good. I mean, Korean Zombie is a guy, he has, 3 first-round finishes in a row. His only loss in recent memory is the, shock KO to Yair. He was a guy who last week we said that he would have gotten a title shot not taking this fight, right? Like we thought he was the clear number 1 contender at 145. Brian Ortega dismantled him. Was not close. So you beat the guy who we consider number 1 that handily, you're now number 1. And Brian Ortega has gone from number 3 to the clear number 1 in my mind.
I agree. I totally agree. I don't think there's any other fight to make for Volkanovski right now. So let me ask you this. What do you think? How do you think that version of Brian Ortega matches up against Max Holloway right now?
Here's my thing. No matter how good of a striker Brian Ortega becomes, he's never going to be Max Holloway, right? We both agree on that Brian Ortega will never be as good of a striker as Max Holloway. And so the question for me at that point is Brian Ortega a way better, basically shoot boxer now than he was when he fought Max. Because it's not really about the striking. He's not going to go in there and outstrike Max over 25 minutes. He could train forever. It won't happen. Like, it's just not the way this game works. Just like Max will never be as good at jiu-jitsu as Brian Ortega. But if Brian Ortega can get good enough at striking where the takedowns he shot against Korean Zombie work against Max, now we're talking about a completely different fight. Because Korean Zombie's way better on the ground than Max Holloway is. And Brian Ortega was way better on the ground than Korean Zombie. So if Brian Ortega can get good enough to where he can take down Max Holloway, that's a fight. He's never going to beat him on the feet, though.
Yeah, I will say about his striking looked, a lot smoother, a lot cleaner, a lot more polished. But I'll say something that stood out to me was his defense. I mean, he didn't take hardly any damage in that fight, and Korean Zombie is a guy that damages everyone. He's like, it's like similar to how I feel about Yoel Romero. It's like you walk into a fight with a guy like Korean Zombie, you're going out in a stretcher. You're going to the hospital. You're going to get cut up. You're going to get hurt. And Brian Ortega didn't get touched. I mean, I think he had maybe split his head open from an incidental headbutt. But outside of that, I mean, he didn't take hardly any damage. And that's a totally different look from the last time we saw him where, he went to war with Max Holloway. And he was just accepting damage, going to war and exchanging with someone. And that would, in my opinion, make that Max Holloway matchup a lot more interesting. But, I'm totally down for him taking on the champion next. For Korean Zombie, he's obviously in a hard spot here. You and I both agree that if he didn't take the Ortega fight, he could have walked into that title fight. Where does he go from here?
I think Max Holloway. I think Max Holloway versus Korean Zombie is the fight to make. It's two guys who are legends at featherweight. I mean, Korean Zombie, if you look at his resume, he's probably a top 5 featherweight all time, at least as far as UFC featherweights go. So he's coming off a loss after a big win streak. Obviously, Max is coming off back-to-back title losses after big win streaks. It's a fan-friendly fight. You can easily put that on a big pay-per-view, like on the main card, and people will get excited about it. I think that's the perfect fight to make right now.
And I think it's an important fight. I think at any point in featherweight, Max Holloway is one fight away from a title shot. I think he could have talked his way into a trilogy, coming off of 2 losses with the champion if he wanted to. But here's who I had in order. I'd like to see him fight Max. If they don't want to make that fight for whatever reason, you make the Calvin Kattar fight. If not that fight, if they go with Calvin Kattar versus Max Holloway, 2 guys, 2 of the top, they would be 2 and 3 right now. So that matchup makes sense. The Edson Barbosa fight would be an awesome fight stylistically. I think Edson's looking to make a push into that top 5 to 10 like we talked about last week. So that's a really fun fight at 145. But, all right, if you're the UFC matchmakers, how do you match up 145 today?
So, Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega for the title. Max versus the Korean Zombie. And I would almost consider that a number 1 contender fight, honestly. I think either of those guys wins, they could be looking at a title shot. Yair versus Zabit. I think anyone who doesn't want to see that fight at this point just doesn't like MMA. And then Calvin Kattar versus Josh Emmett, I think, is actually a really fun kind of under-the-radar fight.
Okay, I have Volkanovski versus Ortega, Max versus Calvin Kattar.
I like that fight.
Yeah, that's another. I see that fight very similar to the Korean Zombie fight. That's just like one of those fights that's going to be a banger. You can throw it on a pay-per-view card. 2 of the best guys right now. So that's my second fight. I agree with you on Zabit and Yair, and then I want Korean Zombie and Edson Barbosa. I think that matches up well. 2 legends, 2 guys that have been around forever. Great stylistic matchup. So that's what I would do. All right. So for Brian Ortega, how do you think that he matches up in the eventual second title shot against Alexander Volkanovski?
So here's my thing, right? Even the old version of Brian Ortega, say Brian Ortega 1.0, who fought Max Holloway, there was never any doubt that he was the more technical fighter than Alexander Volkanovski, right? That version is more technical. This new version that we saw on Saturday is an even more technical version of that, right? But he was always going to have the technique edge, in my opinion. Volkanovski's just not a technical guy, right? But the thing that Alexander Volkanovski is really good at, and we've seen it against Jose Aldo, we've seen it against Max Holloway twice now, he's incredibly good defensively. Whatever he does movement-wise, with his feints, with his power, it throws guys who are volume strikers off of their game. Really, really good kickboxers, it throws them off of their game. So my question is, I think if Volkanovski can neutralize Brian Ortega's, or can neutralize Max Holloway's kickboxing and Jose Aldo's kickboxing, I think he can neutralize Brian Ortega as well. The question for me is if Volkanovski tries to wrestle with Brian Ortega, because that clinch wrestling game, and at least the threat of it, is what sets up a lot of Volkanovski's offense. So he's not going to have that because Brian Ortega is just going to welcome him to the ground. So that's why it's kind of an interesting stylistic matchup for me. I don't think if we see that fight, it looks anything like what we just saw against the Korean Zombie.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a much closer fight. Obviously, Ortega would invite a takedown attempt from Volkanovski. I think the striking is going to be a lot closer than most people would think, just because I mean, Ortega's just improved so much from, the fighter that fought Max Holloway to the fighter we saw last weekend. It's just like levels beyond that. So I think stylistically it's a very close matchup, very fun matchup. One, again, that you could make, towards the end of the year or early next year, January, of next year. So, I'll be looking forward to that. All right, off of that card, any other fights of note?
So shout out to my guy, Guram Kutateledze.
Jesus.
Where's
he from?
I got to look that one up.
Eastern Bloc somewhere?
He has an absolute war with my guy, former KSW champion, Mateusz Gamrot. He wins a close decision. He gets on the mic and he says he doesn't feel like he won the fight and that the fight belongs to Gamrot. I've never seen that before in my life.
Yeah.
Literally never.
Yeah, I never seen that either.
Shout out to that guy, though.
Yeah.
All Georgia. Right, he's from Georgia, and his nickname is the Georgian Viking.
Huh. Love that. All right. You want to talk about Cyborg real quick, and then we'll get into this week's card?
Yeah, I mean, probably the most dominant win of Cyborg's career.
Oh, my God.
First ever win by submission. I mean, she brutalized that poor woman. Shout out to Arlene Blenko for getting in the cage with Cyborg because she got steamrolled.
I think Cyborg could fight once a month in Bellator and just stack up title defenses. I don't see anyone that's going to challenge her in Bellator, period. Unless
see anyone outside of Amanda Nunes, right? Like, it's not like it's Bellator.
Kayla Harrison, maybe, if the PFL folds.
Oh, get out of here.
Come on, really?
You think Kayla Harrison beats Chris Cyborg in a fight today?
I didn't say beats. I said it would be a more competitive fight than that absolute slaughter that I
think Felicia Spencer could beat Kayla Harrison at 155. How about that? There's your hot take.
Potentially. All right, but yeah, another win for Cyborg. So, all right, let's move on, Billy. The reason we're really here. Huge fight card this weekend. UFC 254 going down on Fight Island. We've got a special start time this weekend of 2 p.m. Eastern on Saturday is the main card start. So the early prelims will be much sooner than that. So let's get into it. Let's start with the co-main event. We've got obviously one of my favorite fighters, Bobby Knuckles. Robert Whittaker back in action this weekend at middleweight in really a number one contender fight against rising middleweight Jared Canonier. A very, very important fight for this division and somewhat flying under the radar just because I think, Khabib versus Justin is such a massive fight with so much at stake. But, Billy, in your mind, is this the number one contender fight at middleweight?
Yeah, and I think it's the number one contender fight no matter who wins, honestly. I think Rob versus Izzy 2 is a big fight. I think with Rob, if Rob is coming off wins against Darren Till and Jared Cannonier, I mean, that's still a big fight. And I think it happens. And then Izzy obviously said that he wanted Jared Cannonier next. So that's definitely happening if Cannonier wins. I don't think Izzy's going to light heavyweight until John Jones has the belt back.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about the Rob Whittaker fight is, I think Israel just feels like he maybe caught Rob at the right time, and it's one of those situations where it's like, I don't know how he could have a cleaner victory against a guy like Rob. So I could see Israel not having a lot to prove taking that fight again, but if Rob goes in there and puts on an awesome performance against Jared Cannonier, who everyone's high on, and especially the champion, I think he's kind of undeniable to get that second matchup against Izzy. So, yeah, this is a huge fight this weekend. But, all right, let's get into the X's and O's here, Billy. How do you see this fight going?
So, for me, the longer that this fight goes, the more it benefits Rob Whittaker, right? Because his cardio and his chin are out of this world when it comes to his
experience, right? I mean, he's been there. The guy did 50 minutes with Yoel Romero. I mean, the dude's
But just
there.
He showed it again against Till, right? Like, he got hurt earlier in that fight.
Yeah.
And, he battled back. Like, that guy is just an absolute warrior in those late rounds. More than maybe anyone in the middleweight division outside of Israel Adesanya, in my opinion. But I think Cannonier just is going to come out early and just start swinging bombs.
Yeah.
I think he realizes how good Rob's cardio is. I think he's going to try and make this kind of an ugly fight, but just trying to throw those power shots. And I kind of see Rob maybe using his takedowns, maybe using his ground game here. Trying to neutralize some of that boxing, because Rob tends to leave his chin out, especially early in fights for whatever reason. It's like he forgets to tuck it until he gets lit up.
He gets clipped. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jared Cannonier has the best power in the middleweight division for me. So he's a former heavyweight. I mean, this guy is just unreal strong. And so that's kind of what I have my eye on. It's can Rob kind of weather this early storm and then kind of get into kind of the technical kickboxing match or, a jiu-jitsu fight that he wants to have in the later rounds?
Yeah, I think for Rob, in my opinion, he's still a top 10 fighter on the planet. Even though he did lose his belt to Israel Adesanya, I just think he's one of the most experienced, one of the most well-rounded. He's got one of the best overall games in MMA. He's good from everywhere. He's got no blaring weaknesses. Mentally, in all the interviews leading up to this fight, he seems to be in a great place. He seemed to be in a great place going into the Darren Till fight, but I just don't think that he was all the way there yet. So I'm expecting to see the best Robert Whittaker we've seen, since his title run. What else? Yeah, I just don't. I don't see this fight being competitive. I get it that Jared Cannonier's got power. He came down from heavyweight, all that good stuff. He's got some good wins. He's fought some good guys. But I don't think he's on the level of Robert Whittaker when it comes to MMA as a whole. I think Robert Whittaker is going to pick him apart. I think he's going to survive the early onslaught, like you said. But I think he's going to pick him apart. I really do. I think this is going to look like Brian Ortega and Korean Zombie last week. And I think Whittaker is going to outclass Jared Cannonier. I really do.
Rob Whittaker has gotten dropped in his last 4 fights. 4. He's now fighting the guy who we're in agreement. The only person I might listen to as having more power than Jared Cannonier at the top of the middleweight division is Yoel Romero, and I think it's close.
Yeah.
I think it's Canonier. If you wanted to say it was Romero, I would say fine, but He's definitely a top 2 guy. Rob gets dropped in every fight these days. Every fight. I agree he's the better striker.
How do you see Canonier beating him here?
He's going to punch him in the face, and then he's going to keep punching him in the face on the ground until the fight ends. Because Rob's defense is not good. Rob walks into right straights almost every single fight.
I don't think so. I think Rob's movement's going to be too much. I think he's going to confuse Canonier, and I guarantee. I think it's going to be just like last weekend. We're not going to see Canonier get started. Rob is just going to outclass him from start to finish. I see a Rob 3rd round TKO, Billy. What do you got?
Oh my God! I think Jared Cannonier knocks him out in the 1st round. I agree with you that Rob Whittaker is the more technical, better MMA fighter. But, like, this is in athleticism is a cheat code situation. And the one thing Rob Whittaker is bad at is the thing that will put you to sleep against Jared Cannonier.
Side bet?
It's a matchup. It's not about Rob Whittaker being a shitty MMA fighter, because I absolutely don't think that. But it's a very bad matchup for him, in my opinion.
I think the only way that Canonier gets a win here is if he just makes that 1st round chaos and Rob obliges to a war and he catches Rob. I don't see him winning a fight over 3 rounds. There's just no way against Robert Whittaker. So I made my pick. I got Robert Whittaker via 3rd round TKO, and I think it's not even going to be close.
Jared Cannonier, 1st round KO.
You're crazy. You're insane. How dare you disrespect Bobby Knuckles like that? All right. The time is here. Justin Gaetjhe is getting his first title shot against one of the most dominant fighters of all time, Khabib Nurmagomedov, 28-0. One of the most dominant champions of all time, taking on one of the most violent and electric strikers of our era. Billy, I'm pumped. I'm so pumped. We're only a couple days away. But anyway, how do you see this fight going?
I think Khabib is finally going to get respect from the entire MMA fan base. I think there's going to be no more argument about how dominant and how good this man is after this fight, to be honest. Everyone talks about how good Justin's wrestling is, right? You know, All-American, Northern Colorado, can't be taken down, whatever. You read some of these accounts that have been coming out about people who roll with Khabib, people who have fought Khabib, like what it feels like on the ground up against the cage with this guy. I think this is going to look early pretty similar to the Conor McGregor fight. I think Justin's going to, kind of feint a few strikes, try and make his reads. And then I think eventually Khabib is just going to chain wrestle him, put him up against the fence, drag him to the ground, and do the exact same thing that he does to everyone else, lace up the legs, and punch Justin Gaetjhe in the face and win a 50-45 decision. That's honestly what I see happening.
What? What are you smoking today, Billy? Oh, my God. No, that's not going to happen. All right, I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen. I think these are two guys that have built a career basically off of breaking guys, obviously in two different ways. Justin started with the chaotic, just blood and guts, striking, wild fights. And then Khabib's got that style that, he's kind of the last of a dying breed of just dominant MMA wrestlers. But he's got that one style. He'll take you down, control you, beat you up, and make you quit. I think this is Khabib's toughest test to date. I think Justin's the most dangerous guy that he's fought. With the combination of the wrestling, the newly improved Justin Gaetjhe 2.0 striking, I just think this is a really dangerous fight for Khabib, and I think it's a lot closer than you're thinking it is. I really do. What in your mind is the biggest question around this fight, when you're thinking about kind of the X's and O's of this fight for each guy?
I mean, for Justin, right? He's never fought a wrestler of Khabib's caliber in MMA. He's never even fought someone like who's in the same stratosphere as Khabib in the wrestling department. So it's like, to me, how much of this fight will be contested on the feet? Because that's where we all think Justin Gaethje has the advantage. Nobody thinks Justin Gaethje's going in there to wrestle with Khabib. So, like, he has to keep this standing and then use his body punching and his leg kicks to kind of slow Khabib down. Because the thing that everybody talks about when you finally get in the cage with Khabib is how much faster that guy is than they thought he would be. You know, he catches people off guard all the time. And so he has to slow Khabib down. And then when Khabib's going for those low single leg takedowns that he likes so much, Justin has to be willing to kind of accept the takedown in order to inflict damage. Justin has some of the best elbows in the lightweight division. He's got to hit Khabib with elbows and then figure out a way to get up off his back, because you're not going to just stuff the takedown against Khabib.
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest question, and I think we're going to get this answer early. It's like the first wrestling exchange is so important for the course of this fight. You know, if Justin can stuff a couple takedowns early and build confidence, you know, because Khabib's never going to stop. That's what he thrives on. He doesn't necessarily always get that first shot, but it's the second, the third, the fourth one. He finally gets you down, and then he controls you and beats you up. So I think that first wrestling exchange is very, very important. And it's like, I think Justin for sure is going to get taken down, but it's like, what can he do? What can he do to not be on his back? What can he do to get back up? And no one's been able to do that against Khabib, period, across 28 fights. So, yeah, that's the biggest question for me. It's like, when he gets taken down, he's definitely going to get taken down. What does he do? Can he get up? Can he scramble?
So how's he going to win, Parker? How's he going to win? Because guess what? I agree with you that, like, I think Justin Gaethje's a phenomenal MMA fighter. I'm not sure I would say I think Dustin Poirier is better than Justin Gaethje, but we can disagree on that. I'm fine. But nobody has stopped Khabib from taking them down, and nobody has gotten up since he took them down. Nobody. It's literally never happened over a 25-minute fight. If you get taken down with Khabib, you're glued to that mat. That's the reality. Like, so I just don't see it. I want to see it. I love Justin Gaethje. I think he's a phenomenal, exciting fighter. But at the end of the day, like, this guy, Khabib, is just different. It's a different type of fighter. Like, he's going to get in there. He's going to push the pace. He's going to get Justin against the fence. And then Justin's going to hit the mat. And how many rounds he survives is determinant on, when they start that round standing, how many minutes can you stay on your feet? That's going to be how many rounds he can survive.
Yeah, I just think he's got to use movement. And the biggest thing, he's got to stay in the center of the octagon and try to get Khabib to exchange with him. And then when Khabib shoots, he's got to stay on his feet. You know, if not, I agree with you. If he gets taken down twice in the first round, it's going to look like the Conor McGregor, the Dustin Poirier fight. But I think out of all the guys that Khabib has fought, Justin's got the deepest skill set, or the best skill set for Khabib. You know, the defensive wrestling is phenomenal. I think he's been taken down twice in his UFC career and held down for 17 seconds total, albeit none of those guys are Khabib Nurmagomedov. But very interesting matchup. You know, I kind of feel if Justin can block a couple early takedowns and just start chipping away at Khabib, he's going to have a better chance to win. But let's get into the path for victories. For Justin Gaethje, what do you think he has to do to win this fight?
To me, it's all about, like I was talking about earlier, how long can he keep the fight standing? The way that he's going to do that is with leg kicks and body punches. So using those combos, you know, we know Trevor Whitman is an absolute master with this sort of thing, but using those combos to slow down Khabib, so when Khabib blitzes in, it's slower and Justin can get out of the way and use the footwork that you talked about. But in order to make that happen, you have to slow down Khabib. And so that's what I'm worried about, is by the time he's able to do that in the fourth and fifth round, usually, like, is Khabib already up 3 rounds on the scorecard and kind of cruising to a victory, because we know Justin Gaethje's kind of a grinder in terms of his striking style. He kind of like wears guys down over the course of a fight.
Yeah, the old Justin Gaetjhe, I think, was more of a, he's going to take you out, break you with his striking. But the most recent Justin Gaetjhe is a much more calculated striker, more of a counterpuncher, dangerous, kind of one punch, picks his shots a lot better. So it's a different version of Justin Gaetjhe. But for me, I think the biggest thing, like I said, is the first couple wrestling exchanges. In the first round with Conor McGregor, I think you and I both knew it was done after that first round. Like, he wasn't getting out of there. That's how the fight was going to look. If Justin can avoid getting taken down, stay off the cage for the first couple rounds, build his confidence, frustrate Khabib, I think he has a lot better chance going deeper into the round. So defensive wrestling is number one for me. Leg kicks are huge part of Justin Gaethje's game. He's got, in my opinion, some of the best leg kicks in maybe MMA history ever. It's just vicious. He's stopped multiple guys with it. See the Dustin Poirier fight, the Michael Johnson fight, the Eddie Alvarez fight. Just does absolutely damage with those leg kicks. So I think he needs to invest in that early. Anytime Khabib shoots, he's got to load up that lead leg. Anytime Khabib throws a jab, he's got to load up that lead leg. Justin Gaethje needs to be unleashing calf and leg kicks. And Justin Gaethje said this, hundreds of times. He's like, I need 2 to 3 leg kicks to change the course of any fight. And I believe that in this fight. If he goes in there and just starts hammering those calf kicks in that first round and hurts Khabib, that's going to change the course of the fight. So leg kicks are number 2 for me. Stick to the game plan. Trevor Whitman, like you said, is one of the brightest and just best minds in MMA at the moment. I think whatever game plan he's put in place for Justin's got to stick to that game plan. You saw in the Tony Ferguson fight, just some minor adjustments he made. Like Justin, I think, round 3 or so, kept loading up, trying to finish Tony Ferguson. And Trevor Whitman said, hey, just make contact. Be smart. Just keep hitting him. Pick your shots. And it's little things like that I think make a big difference. And then the counter striking. I think Justin's became much more of a counter striker, and he's going to have to fight off the back foot because Khabib is going to be super aggressive and trying to chase him down all over the octagon. So those are really my 4 things for Justin. Let's get into Khabib. What do you think he has to do? I think we all know what he has to do to get the victory, but go over it here.
It's really about pace for me with Khabib, right? It's how fast are his shots? How fast is he able to chain one takedown attempt to the next? And then how fast is he able to kind of counter punch and land that jab in his striking, right? So if Khabib is moving quick, there's nobody in the world has a chance against him at 155 pounds. So that's my key for him, is kind of push that pace, create that pressure early, and then slow Justin down late because of all the pressure from the early rounds, and kind of cruise your way to a victory.
Yeah, for me, it's what got him to the dance. He's got to stick to that. He's got almost a 50% takedown percentage, success percentage in the UFC. So I think just that constant grind and constantly shooting for the takedown wears all these guys down. And by the 3rd or 4th round, they're broken. And that's when he goes in, gets the finish or gets the submission, when the gas tank's completely drained. And he's done it time after time to, some of the best guys in the world at lightweight. So I think that's what he's got to do. He's got to avoid the big shots from Justin too. Justin's one of these guys, got similar to Conor McGregor. It's like, he's got one punch knockout power. We've never really seen Khabib hurt, so I think he'll be looking out for that, but he's got to watch out from that one shot power from Justin Gaethje. All right, let's get into some hypotheticals here. So Billy, if Justin Gaethje upsets you and knocks out your guy, Khabib Nurmagomedov, do you think Khabib has done enough to deserve an immediate rematch?
Do not mistake analysis for favoritism, my friend. How dare you? How dare you slander Justin Gaethje?
I'm still mad about your comments on Bobby Knuckles. All right.
I think it's very possible that if it's a decision, especially if it's a close decision, like a 3-2 decision, I think they could definitely book an immediate rematch if Gaethje wins.
Yeah.
I could also see the UFC going straight for Gaethje-Poirier too. That was a fight of the year contender, and it only gets it could be an all-timer with a belt on the line with those two guys duking it out over 5 rounds. So if Gaethje wins, that's kind of I see them going one of those two directions.
Yeah, I agree. This fight's weird. This is one of those fights that I don't think it's going to be close. Like, I don't see this being a close decision either way. Either Khabib's going to dominate him or Justin Gaethje's going to stuff takedowns and pick him apart, I think, on the feet. So for me, Khabib is obviously a global superstar now. I think he's just as big of a star, especially internationally, as Conor McGregor is for the sport. So, I think based on that alone, I agree. If it's a close fight, I could see them doing the rematch. I think either way, you've got to force Conor McGregor to fight Dustin Poirier. You have to. You can't I don't think you can let either of those guys skip the queue and get right back into a title match. I think both of those guys have to fight. So that's what I see. I think you do McGregor, Poirier, the winner gets the winner of this fight. If Justin Gaethje is able to get this win, where would you put him in the pound-for-pound rankings right now? Because I think Khabib in most people's rankings is either number 1 or number 2. So if Justin Gaethje pulls a win off of that guy, where do you put Justin Gaethje?
So I think right now the top 5 for men is John Jones, Khabib, Israel Adesanya, Stipe Miocic, Kamaru Usman, Alexander Volkanovski, then Justin Gaethje. I would move him above Volkanovski with this win, but not above Usman.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think?
I moved him above Usman, probably just to piss you off a little bit. I agree. He was 7th right now. I put him at 4 above Volkanovski and Usman, just because I think if he's able to beat a dominant champion like Khabib, he deserves a lot of respect. A lot of respect. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about Khabib. So, if Khabib wins here and becomes 29-0, what is this special matchup that you think Dana has planned for him?
So, yeah, Khabib keeps talking about this, right? He says Dana has something special planned for him. I think it's a fight in Moscow. I think if Khabib wins this, he's going to get a fight in Moscow. We know that he's wanted to fight in Russia for a while because of the pay-per-view situation. They've can't really do that, but now that they've been doing these cards in Abu Dhabi, like, why not, right? So that's what I think is going to happen.
I agree. I think it's going to be a Moscow fight, sometime in 2021, and I think it's going to be a GSP. I don't think Khabib has any interest in fighting Conor McGregor again. He was quoted earlier this week saying he wouldn't fight Conor McGregor for $5 billion or if he was gifted the UFC. I don't think that Khabib wants anything to do with that again. I don't think he wants the nastiness of the lead up. He doesn't think it's going to improve his legacy, and I just think he's over it. I think he's moved on. I really do. And I think his big goal is to become 30-0. That was the goal his father put in place for him, and they always talk about it. So if he's able to do that in front of his home country against GSP and, toss his name in the hat for the greatest of all time with the win against GSP, I don't think there's a better situation for that than that. So,
wait. Just so we're clear, if Khabib beats Justin Gaethje in his prime, he's not the greatest of all time. But then if he beats 40-year-old GSP in his home country, he now becomes the greatest of all time?
That's the other thing. It's like, where does he fight him to? Like, obviously GSP, does Khabib go up to 170 for a one-time fight? I just don't see GSP coming down to 155, and if he did, I don't think it's going to be the best.
Why do we need? I know Khabib idolized GSP and that's his dream fight, but as fans, Why do we care about him beating a 40-year-old fighter who hasn't fought since, 2017?
I don't. I think he's the one pushing that. He wants that fight for his legacy, just to say that, hey, I beat George St. Pierre.
Fight Tony Ferguson for your legacy. That's the fight.
No, I'm on board with you. I'm just telling you. I think that's what Khabib and Dana are thinking about. They're trying to get GSP down for one last ride, which is big business. You don't think so?
George is not going to do that. I think GSP is truly, honestly done.
Really?
Yes.
I don't know. I think it's going
to be Tony Ferguson in Moscow. That's my guess.
Tony Ferguson coming off a beating to Justin Gaetjhe? He would have to get another win.
I think Tony Ferguson. Well, we'll get to it. Okay. I think Tony Ferguson is going to fight someone who we're going to talk about in the very next set of questions.
Okay, let me ask you this. What's a bigger fight, assuming Khabib gets past Justin Gaetjhe this weekend? The Conor McGregor 2 or George St. Pierre?
Conor McGregor 2. No question. I don't think it's close.
Okay. All right, let's move on here. So, all right, with the win, is there any chance that you think this is it for Khabib? That he's done? Has he accomplished everything he wants to?
So we talked about it last segment, but I think he should fight Tony Ferguson and then retire at 30-0. If he beats Tony Ferguson, here's his resume at 155, right? Conor, Al Iaquinta, Edson Barbosa, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Rafael Dos Anjos. Who has that resume at 155? That's a John Jones style.
Tony Ferguson?
I beat every great fighter. Tony hasn't beaten Dustin. Tony hasn't beaten Conor. Tony's not 30-0. I mean, the only other one that I think would be interesting, Tony Ferguson's interesting, and then if he wants to go up to 170, beat Kamaru Usman, and then retire at 30-0, that's pretty impressive as well. But
but that's another one. That's
greatest of all time.
That's I don't think the UFC is interested in having a Kamaru Usman Khabib fight at all. I don't see that as a draw.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, when you have Conor and you have GSP on the table.
But Conor and GSP aren't legacy fights at that point. If you want a legacy fight, it's Tony Ferguson or it's a second belt.
Yeah.
Conor and GSP are money fights. But Khabib never does that.
Yeah, I don't think Khabib cares about money, but I think for whatever reason in the back of his head, he wants that fight with GSP. I really do think that's something he's been set on. All right, so we kind of already answered this, but do you think there's any outside chance of the UFC skipping the Dustin versus Conor alleged matchup in January and just, pole vaulting Conor into a second fight with Khabib after being basically off the whole year?
There's a part of me that thinks the lockdown in Ireland is going to force that, at least push that fight back as is. But I don't think Khabib and Conor ever fight again. I just don't think it happens. Not as long as Khabib is champion.
I just think I don't need to see it either. I don't think there's going to be a huge difference in that matchup, even with a dedicated Conor McGregor. I really don't. So, who do you think needs the other more? I think at this point, Conor needs Khabib to get his stardom, above where it was at its peak.
Oh, to get him above where he was? Yeah, because when Conor was at his peak, he was a 2-weight world champion coming off beating the best featherweight of all time and the guy who held the 155 belt, right? There's no way to get back to that peak without beating UFC champions. And Conor just hasn't beaten UFC champions his past couple times out.
So you don't see any shot of the UFC skipping the Conor Dustin fight to throw him back in there with Khabib?
No, definitely not. I don't think that's even on the table.
Yeah, I don't think you could push that or sell that. All right, last thing on the Conor Dustin fight. What are your thoughts on that fight being up at 170? There's obviously a lot of blowback this week and the last couple weeks about that.
No, they're going to fight at 155. That's my guess.
They have to, yeah. I agree.
Like, when it's Cowboy and it's like, all right, Conor McGregor's coming back, there's not really big stakes for this fight other than the fact that it's just like Conor's return. Like, and you want to say, I don't really want to cut weight, let's fight at 170. That's fine, right? This is a legitimate number one contenders fight. Like, you need to show that you can make the lightweight limit and still be a great fighter.
Right. All right, this is another storyline that I haven't heard talked about a lot, but obviously Khabib's father passed away due to circumstances involving COVID. Back in March or April, maybe? It was pretty early. Yeah, it was pretty early in the COVID situation. But obviously Khabib's father was someone that all of his inner circle looked up to. He was, their trainer, kind of a role model to these guys. Someone that was always in Khabib's corner when he could be. What, if any, effect do you think this will have on Khabib's performance this Saturday?
I mean, Khabib has been asked about it in literally every interview I've seen, and he's like very clearly sick of talking about it, which is, I feel bad for the guy, right? Like, you lose your father and, that's all anybody's asking you about all fight week. I think the effect of this sort of thing, when you lose, it's one thing to lose a father, right? But to lose a coach from a mixed martial arts standpoint, you typically don't see the effect of that in the short term. It's only in the long term that when you have to have someone else who's running your day-to-day training, that you start to lose the habits that you developed under your old coach. I think Kevin Lee is a perfect example.
That's exactly who I was thinking of. Yeah.
With Robert Follis of getting into some bad habits, kind of not the fight immediately following his passing, but in kind of subsequent fights after that. So I don't think this will have a huge effect on Khabib's game plan or ability to fight in this particular fight. I think the place you would see it is, 2, 3, 4 fights down the road.
I agree. I think it's just something to keep in the back of your mind during this fight. The thing that kind of brought this question to my mind was, I think remembering back to the Conor McGregor fight, his father wasn't in his corner. It was stateside and his father couldn't get over. And I remember Javier Mendez, basically imploring him to get back to father's game plan is what he called it. And I think Khabib was feeling good and wanted to strike with Conor. So I don't know. I think his father is the one that instilled that game plan in him. Like, hey, you're going to take guys down. You're going to smash them. You're going to become the most dominant champion, in 155 history. So it'll be interesting not having them there and to also kind of see where Khabib's motivation is. So I heard I think it was Dan Hardy this week talking about it, saying his grandfather, who basically raised him, passed away, 3 weeks before the GSP fight. And he said the motivation going into that fight was just amplified all week. So that'll be interesting to see, how motivated, obviously he's motivated, but if we see a different Khabib this week. All right, let's move on to Michael Chandler. So Michael Chandler, we've talked about in the past, obviously just made the move over from Bellator to add to what is already probably one of the deepest divisions in MMA. But where is Michael Chandler in all of this?
I kind of think he's going to end up fighting Tony Ferguson by the end of the year. I think that's just the fight that ends up happening the way that things have shaken out. And I'm totally fine with that for his debut. I think it's right where he's at in the rankings. Yeah.
Well, he's at Fight Island. He's basically the backup, which I still think is kind of weird. But anyway, so yeah, I'm down with that. I think I've said it before, but I think Tony Ferguson or Dan Hooker are kind of your 1A, 1B best matchups for Michael Chandler to jump into the division right now. So for Michael Chandler, in the we won't say the very rare, because Khabib's missed weight before, fallen out of fights before. If by some chance, and knock on wood, hopefully this doesn't happen, one of these guys falls out this weekend, how do you match Michael Chandler up against each of these guys, Khabib and Justin?
I'm not really convinced that Michael Chandler could beat either guy at this stage of his career. Gaethje's obviously a much more winnable fight for Michael Chandler, as is Justin Gaetjhe is a more winnable fight for everyone than Khabib is, right? Khabib is just a stylistic nightmare for every single fighter in that division. I actually think Khabib is like a much better version of Michael Chandler, right? It's kind of a similar game plan, but Khabib's just way, way better at it. Not to say that Michael Chandler's not very good, because he is, but I think 3 to 4 years ago, Michael Chandler could probably make the argument he's the best 155er in the world. At 34, with a recent KO loss to Pitbull, I don't know that he's in that conversation anymore. He's definitely still in the top 10. He's very good. I don't know if he's up there with the top 1 or 2 guys at this point in his career.
Yeah, I think he's competitive with maybe number 4 to 10, but in the elite of the elite, Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, Justin Gaethje, Khabib, even Tony Ferguson, I just think they're one step ahead of Michael Chandler at this point in his career, and obviously we'll find out, shortly. But yeah, I think Khabib kind of just weathers the early storm, but Michael Chandler takes him down, wears him down, and wins pretty handily over 5 rounds. Justin, I think, yes, it's a closer fight, but still, I think Justin's just a younger, better overall fighter right now, and I think he would actually probably finish Michael Chandler.
Yeah, I think the striking is too much.
Yeah, I
Justin.
do too.
I think he probably knocks him out with one of those hooks.
Yeah, I do too. And Michael Chandler's a guy that's like foot on the gas the whole time, So I think he could walk into a big shot from Justin. All right, so where do you rank Michael Chandler currently?
So there's a group of guys, kind of like you said, that second tier of what I would call a second tier of lightweights, right? And I would rank them this way from best to worst: Do Bronx, Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler, Dan Hooker, then Paul Felder. I think those guys are all very even. I think they have similar standings in the division. And I would match any of them up, and I think it would be a very close fight.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he beats any of those 4 guys I named: Conor, Justin, Khabib, Tony, Dustin. 5 guys. I don't think he beats those guys, but that next tier, like you're saying, every one of those fights in my mind is a 50-50 fight, So, yeah, I'd say he slots in somewhere around 5 to 6 right now with the Paul Felders, the Dan Hookers, the Charles de Bronx of the world. All right, Billy, it's time for our predictions. We've been at odds this episode, so let's keep that train rolling. Go ahead.
Yeah, man, I'm going Khabib by decision. It's not because I love Justin Gaetjhe. You know that, Parker. I'm offended that you acted like I'm some big Khabib fan and not a unabashed lover of Justin Gaethje's ability to fight in a cage. But I just think Khabib is too much, and I think he's too much for everyone. Like after the McGregor fight, I told you I was like, I'm never picking against Khabib again, ever. Like. I just think this guy is an all-time great, and I think he's going to do to Justin Gaethje what he's done to everyone else. I think it's going to be a 50-45 decision.
I think Justin's going to give him a lot more trouble in the wrestling department. I really do. I think he's going to be able to force some scrambles. It's going to be a lot closer than people think. So I'm going to go with Justin Gaethje. I think he's going to be able to get out of some early takedown attempts, scramble, frustrate Khabib. Turn it into more of his game. Keep the fight in the center of the octagon and just inflict damage. That's what the guy does, and there's no hotter fighter right now probably in the organization than Justin Gaethje. So I'm rolling with the Justin Gaethje 4th round KO. Backflip off the top of the octagon, Fight Island, your new champion of the world.
Hey, would love to see it.
So I'm pumped, Billy. I'm super pumped. I cannot wait for Saturday to get here.
You want to give the people our hardcore fight, and then we can get out of here.
Go ahead, give them your hardcore fight.
Nathaniel Wood against Casey Kenny. Parker, I know you know who Nathaniel Wood is because that's one of your UK guys. Trained by Brad One Punch Pickett. People love the slaps as he's walking into the octagon, right? Considered probably the best 135 prospect in all of Europe. Only loss in the UFC is to noted fan favorite Merab Dvalishvili. But Casey Kenny wins over guys like Ray Borg, our guy Brandon Royval, Luis Smolka, and Manny Bermudez. This is going to be a banger, Parker. Capital B banger. Tune in for this one on the prelims early Saturday morning.
I had 3 fights, really. The Robert Whittaker Canonier fight, that's going to be a banger. And it's kind of, like I said, it's flying under the radar because of how big and important this Justin versus Khabib fight is. But everyone tune into that. That's the co-main event. I believe to kick off the main card, our guy is back. Ion Kuntalaba is back against, I'm going to butcher this name, Billy. You go ahead with the...
Magomed Ankalaev.
There you go.
The rematch of the fight that made us fall in love with our boy Jan Kuntalaba.
The rope-a-dope. And I think these guys both of them have had positive COVID tests leading up to this fight.
Oh, yeah. It's been canceled twice due to positive COVID tests on either side.
Yeah. This is going to be a chaos fight. So keep an eye on that one. And then another one that, I didn't see until today. Our guy, Tai Bam Bam Tuivasa, is back in action at heavyweight, taking on the skyscraper, Stefan Struve. Billy, will we see our first Fight Island shoey this weekend?
Man, Mick Maynard better have it ready for Tai Tuivasa, right? Like,
someone better have a beer in their hand.
The people want it. This is a hell of a card, man. It's got some low-key, there's not a lot of, ranked fighters on this other than the Canonier-Whittaker matchup.
Yeah.
But this is loaded with action fighters. Loaded with guys who just get in there and bang.
Yeah. This Khabib versus Gaethje fight, this is a fight I think this is the most pumped I've been for one single fight, all year. This is crazy. This is going to be awesome. So, yeah, everyone tune into the fights this weekend. Like we said, early start. So make sure to get out there, get the pay-per-view, and get your popcorn ready around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Central Time. So, Billy, any closing words?
I still, we could talk about this offline, but we need to come up with some sort of contest when we disagree this much on our picks.
We need to keep a running tally over the year, and we see how dominant I am in my picks over you. You're supposed to be the analyst, aren't you? Like a writer, a beat writer, or something. Come on, I'm just a guy talking shit.
Well, Parker, the nice part is I don't pick against Alexander Volkanovski every single time he fights.
Mark my words, T-City Ortega, your new champ. All right, Parker's MMA show. Like always, what is that, episode 52? We're rocking and rolling, Billy. 51, 52. We're getting up in the 50s. All right, our Ray Lewis episode. We appreciate everyone for tuning in. Continue to like, share, do all that good stuff. If you haven't check out our interview with Frank Mir we did a couple weeks ago. That was really cool, really good interview. And we'll be back next week to recap the fight. So everyone have a safe weekend and enjoy the fights.
Texas Trees is the premier tree care company in the DFW area. Whether you need basic maintenance or specialized services, when it comes to trees, we've got you covered. Pruning, chipping, bracing, and cabling, even root barriers and disease control, we do it all. And if you aren't sure what you need, we have certified arborists on staff to point you in the right direction. Visit us at northtexastrees.net. That's northtexastrees.net. Thanks for listening to Parker's MMA Show. Take a moment to rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and visit ParkerKeensMMAShow.podbean.com for additional information on Parker and to stay up to date on the latest drama in the fight world. For more information and important links about today's episode, check out the show notes.